Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so glad you're here for this one because we've custom tailored today's mission specifically for you.
Yeah, we are diving into something really profound today.
We really are because, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of like total precision, like engineering. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is.
Right. It's incredibly straightforward.
Exactly. But step into the world of neurodevelopment and psychology, and suddenly that diagnostic landscape becomes incredibly murky. Tracking the invisible wreckage of human emotion requires a completely different kind of imaging.
Oh, definitely. And that brings us to what we're looking at today.
Right. Our mission is to explore a fascinating 2025 study published in Discover Psychology. It's a paper that attempts to finally X-ray one of the heaviest, most destructive emotions in the human psyche, which is shame.
And shame is arguably the most complex emotion to map out, largely because, well, we misuse the word so frequently in everyday life.
We do, yeah. Like mixing it up with guilt.
Exactly. We use shame and guilt interchangeably. But in clinical psychology, there is a hard, distinct line between the two. The definition operating in this specific research characterizes shame as a self-conscious emotion, driven by a perception of failure and worthlessness.
So it's that discrepancy between your actual self and your ideal self.
Right. Guilt is the feeling that you did a bad thing. Shame, on the other hand, is the deeply internalized conviction that you are a bad person.
Wow. It's the difference between making a mistake and believing you are the mistake.
Precisely. And for you listening, this matters because the fallout from carrying that specific conviction is just devastating. Shame is heavily linked to severe psychological distress.
Especially the demographic this study focuses on, right, which is men.
Yes. For men, deeply ingrained shame correlates with increased risks for explosive anger, substance addiction, and even suicidal ideation. It fundamentally alters how you interact with the world. It pushes you into this profound, constant urge to hide.
And yet there's so little research on this.
Which is surprising. Very few studies have looked at the life course origins of shame, specifically in men. We know it's destructive in adulthood, but tracing the breadcrumbs back to where that I am a bad person cognition first takes root has historically been really difficult.
Yeah, let's unpack this, because tracing that timeline requires incredibly specific data, and that's where the methodology of this study comes in. The researchers looked at 558 Australian men from the Men in Parenting Pathway study, or the MAPP study.
Right, and they were all around the age of 30.
Yeah, and because this study is longitudinal, they aren't just looking at a single cross-sectional snapshot. They actually separated the men's childhood memories from their adult feelings of shame by a gap of several years.
And that time gap is crucial. It allows us to make much stronger inferences about causality.
Because if you ask someone how they feel today, and in the same breath ask, hey, how were you parented 20 years ago?
Their current bad mood might totally color their memory.
Right. So by separating those data points, the researchers can see how the psychological environment up to age 16 genuinely predicts the emotional reality at age 30.
Exactly.
So before we can fully understand adult shame, we really have to understand the specific ways psychologists categorize those childhood relationships.
Right, the anatomy of parental bonding.
Yeah. So I want you to imagine a giant soundboard for parenting, like the kind you'd see in a professional recording studio. But this soundboard only has two main sliders on it.
Okay, I like this analogy.
The first slider is care. This is all about warmth, empathy, and emotional closeness. Push the slider up, and the environment is super affectionate. Pull it down, and it becomes cold or detached.
Right, and the second slider is control.
Yes, control. And we should be clear here, this isn't about setting like healthy boundaries. It's not a bedtime. This slider measures restriction and psychological intrusion.
So pushing it up means invading privacy, micromanaging, really stifling the child's autonomy.
Exactly. And pulling it down gives the kid the independence to make choices and experience natural consequences. So depending on how a parent mixes those two sliders, they create one of four distinct parenting styles.
Right. Based on the parental bonding instrument used in the study, Quadrant 1 is optimal parenting.
That's the goal, right?
Ideally, yeah. The care slider is high and the control slider is low. So the child receives deep affection but is trusted to navigate the world independently.
Okay, so high care, low control. What's Quadrant 2?
Quadrant 2 is affectionate constraint. This is where both sliders are pushed all the way up. The warmth is absolutely there, but so is the psychological intrusion.
Oh, so we're talking about helicopter parenting.
Exactly. The child is fiercely loved but completely smothered.
Got it.
Then we drop the care slider for quadrant 3, which is affectionless control. Care is low, but control is high. It's a restrictive, micromanaged environment devoid of warmth.
Sounds awful.
It is. And finally, quadrant 4 is neglectful parenting. Both sliders are at the bottom. Low care, low control.
Just ignoring the kid's needs entirely.
Pretty much.
So, quick question on behalf of the listener here. Is it possible for parents to genuinely believe they're in that optimal zone, like they think they're providing gentle love, but the child actually experiences it as affectionate constraint because the control dial is secretly cranked up in the kid's mind?
That is a fantastic question. And the beauty of this study's design is that the parent's intention is actually irrelevant to the outcome.
Wait, really? Irrelevant?
Completely. The data is based entirely on the men's recollections of their parents up to age 16, meaning the subjective experience of the child is what ultimately embeds itself into their adult psyche.
Oh, wow. So if a teenager perceives an environment as highly controlling, their brain adapts to a highly controlling environment, regardless of what the parent to do.
Exactly. The perception creates the reality of the emotional bond.
So we have the 4 quadrants mapped out, which brings us to the most striking finding of this study. Which of these 4 specific mixes actually causes the most shame later in life?
And the data pointed to one glaring standout.
Yeah, it really did. Compared to optimal parenting, affectionless control, so that combination of low care and high control was the strongest predictor of feelings of shame in adult men. And that was true for their relationships with both mothers and fathers.
It was the ultimate shame generator.
But I have to push back on this slightly. Wait, wouldn't outright neglect be the absolute worst? I mean, why is a combination of coldness and micromanagement worse than total abandonment?
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychological mechanisms. Neglect is undeniably damaging, yes, but shame requires a very specific psychological recipe to cook up.
Okay, what's the recipe?
Well, the paper uses 2 frameworks to explain it: functionalist theory and cognitive attributional theory.
Cognitive attributional theory, so, meaning how a child attributes the cause of a situation.
Yes, exactly. If a child's home is cold and affectionless, they don't rationalize it by thinking, oh, my parents lack emotional regulation skills.
Right, they're kids. They just think, I am the problem.
Precisely. The lack of care makes them feel fundamentally unworthy or unlovable. Now, add extreme control into the mix, which violates their autonomy.
So they can't make their own choices.
Right. And functionally, shame is an emotion designed to keep us aligned with our social group. It makes us aware of when we're failing, so we don't get cast out. When a parent is constantly overriding a child's decisions, the child feels incapable and incompetent.
Oh, I see. So when you combine feeling unlovable with feeling completely incompetent, it perfectly cooks up that adult feeling of shame.
Exactly. It solidifies the belief that you are fundamentally a failure in the eyes of society.
That is so heavy. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the study didn't just lump parents together as a single unit. When the researchers looked at mothers and fathers separately, this massive, surprising gender divide appeared in the data.
The rules of the quadrants shifted completely depending on the parent's gender.
Yes. So looking at the split findings, neglectful parenting from fathers significantly predicted adult shame, but neglect from mothers did not show that same strong association.
Which is a huge divergence.
And it gets wilder. There was some weak evidence that affectionate constraint from mothers, so helicopter parenting, caused shame, but high control, combined with high care from fathers, did not predict shame at all.
None whatsoever.
So why the massive difference?
Well, we have to look at the bigger picture of traditional gender norms and self-discrepancy theory. Historically, fathers are viewed as disciplinary figures, protectors, rule setters.
Right, the traditional paternal archetype.
Exactly. So for a young boy, a father who is highly controlling but also warm and caring might just be seen as fulfilling a normative paternal role. It doesn't elicit shame because the control feels like guidance.
It feels like love, like dad is keeping me safe.
Right. But mother's over-involvement is often internalized by a son as an undermining of his autonomy.
It's like boys are reading from 2 completely different societal scripts, one for mom and one for dad. Micromanaging from mom feels undermining, like she doesn't think he's capable. But strict rules from dad, paired with warmth, feels like love. But if dad completely checks out, It breaks the compass.
It does. A father who is entirely neglectful represents a devastating rejection from the boy's primary masculine role model. That creates a massive discrepancy between who the boy feels he is and the masculine ideal he believes he's supposed to reach.
Wow. That brings us back to you, the listener. Why does this matter right now? I mean, why did the researchers specifically look at men who were around age 30?
Because the ages of 30 to 45 are what theorists call established adulthood. It is a major crunch time in a person's life.
Yeah, the training wheels come off.
Exactly. It's filled with intense demands regarding career development, serious relationships, family building, and experiencing deep ingrained shame during this crunch time can severely impede a man's ability to maintain intimate relationships or, parent effectively.
Because shame tells you to hide, but your 30s demand that you show up.
And the friction there is dangerous. The study notes a previous finding from this same cohort. Shame heavily predicts future depression. And unfortunately, it actively discourages these men from seeking mental health treatment.
Right, because admitting you need help feels like the ultimate confirmation of your failure.
Precisely.
But it's not all doom and gloom here. The study excitedly brings up solutions, right? Like specific interventions, such as programs called Tuning Into Teens.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, these interventions focus on something called emotion socialization.
Which is basically teaching parents to recognize and validate their kids' emotions rather than dismissing them.
Exactly. Instead of reacting with affectionless control and shutting down a teenager's anger, you validate the feeling. You say, I see you're angry, and that makes sense. This builds autonomy and warmth, which pulls parents right back into that optimal quadrant.
So for you listening, even if you don't have kids, how does recognizing these patterns help you? Like, how does it destigmatize your own mental health challenges or help you understand the men in your life better?
Well, recognizing it externalizes the shame. You realize it's just old, learned programming. And the study suggests that informal peer group spaces that normalize talking about these lived experiences can be a powerful antidote. Connection actively dissolves that secrecy shame needs to survive.
I love that. So just to wrap up this deep dive, our adult sense of self-worth doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is heavily shaped by the specific balance of warmth and autonomy we were granted in our first 16 years of life.
With cold, controlling environments acting as the biggest catalyst for adult shame.
Exactly. So what does this all mean? Well, we wanted to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over.
Something to really think about today.
Yeah. If shame is essentially a self-conscious emotion born from the internalized voices and reactions of our past,
Yeah.
how much of your current inner critic is actually your own authentic voice? And how much of it is just a 15-year-old echo of someone else turning the control dial up way too high?
That's a powerful question.
Next time you feel like you want to hide, ask yourself, whose voice is really telling you that you failed? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.